Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's guest is Kellie Revoir. Kellie is a real estate agent and team leader who leads a team of realtors closing 250 to 300 homes per year. She's also a real estate investor who does fix and flips and buy and holds, and she speaks on stages and coaches other agents on how to optimize their businesses. It wasn't always this way for Kellie, as in 2011, she got divorced and lost her job while raising her two young boys, ages 3 and 4. She lived for a time on welfare as she had no child support as part of the divorce decree, and yet she made sure her boys never knew they were in financial hardship. Despite not wanting to join her mother's real estate practice, in 2013, Kellie got her real estate license and found she had a talent for it. The real estate business became number one in their market, and the coaching business exploded, bringing significant financial success with it. In fact, Kellie and her boys were recently interviewed at a Tony Robbins event where they were sitting in $2,000 seats, and the event organizers wanted to interview the single mom who had been on food stamps and was sitting in their most expensive seats with her now teenage boys. I'm excited to have Kellie on the show today to share her perspective on how family, hard work, enthusiasm, and trust in God has enabled her to thrive despite the setbacks life has thrown at her. And with that, Kellie Revoir, welcome to the show.
Eric, I am very excited to be here and love that intro. When you put it like that, I think, wow.
You're like, I'm kind of cool, right? I did some
Well,
stuff. I've done some stuff.
I think everybody should hear something like that. We always think of The Gap in the Gain, the book,
Yeah.
The Gap in the Gain, where we haven't been. And when somebody actually, shows you the gain, you're like, oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of road covered there, right? Man, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Such an inspiring story. I know it was awesome to get to meet you before in our pre-call that we had, and just hearing your story and how inspiring it is. I know the audience is going to love hearing all you've got to share. So thank you for taking time to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's talk about what it was like growing up. I know I didn't mention this in the read-in, but you have a family of builders, I think you said. And so tell me about what life was like growing up. What was your family situation, all that?
So I'm very blessed. I have two parents that are still happily married. They've been married now 46 years.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
then it was, I have one younger brother. And, we grew up in the real estate world, hence why I did not want anything to do with real estate. Whenever I was presented the opportunity, I was so burned out on it. When we were kids, we have owned a cabinet store, we've owned a wallpaper store, a paint store, a tool supply store, a cell phone store. So we are a family of entrepreneurs.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, starting at the young old age of 5 years old, I was sanding cabinets and wiping it down when he was staining and sealing them, and laying sod and insulation. And back in the 80s, you weren't necessarily required to have a porta potty on side construction sites. So, it was fun for a little girl.
Right.
And when I was 14 years old, I was like done working construction. So I went and got a job bussing tables, which truthfully, to have air conditioning and not so much dust and dirt, it was it was amazing.
Man. So your dad was built homes from scratch, or he renovated them, or both, or?
Nope, basically just built them from scratch. We
Okay.
didn't start renovating until 2008 when the market crashed and banks weren't any money. That's where we kind of had to be a little creative. That's when he really started flipping and renovating. But yeah, prior to that, it was new construction homes.
Man, and that's a tough business. I mean, I remember being in middle school, we called junior high school at the time, so it was like 7, 8, 9. And I had some buddies that were starting to do construction in the summer, and they were making decent money, for a kid. And I remember the teachers and some of the coaches are like, you do not want to do that business. That business is, to say it in a more flattering way, buttholes and elbows, right? It's everybody's bent over, buckets, elbows up, and it's hard working. And we're in Texas, so it's super hot. And I know you're in Missouri, so you guys get plenty of heat and humidity up there too. But construction sites it's tough places. And for a kid and a little girl, I mean, I have to think, and you're out there on the site, whatever, pitching in where you can, it had to give you an experience of like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Did not want to do that at all. Installation was probably my least favorite thing to do. Yeah. Yeah, especially in the heat, I was the dumb teenager that didn't listen to my father, as most teenagers are, and I would just have on like a little sports bra and little shorts, and he was like, "You might actually want to put on some clothesline insulation." I'm like, "Shut up."
Yes. Oh
Oh
man.
yeah, that was a learning experience.
I remember one time there was a job site in our neighborhood, and they had those rolls of the pink insulation sitting on the
Yep.
job site in the garage. And as kids, it was like this is like it was like a giant trampoline. So we were
Oh,
crawling all over that stuff, rolling on it, jumping on it, and just got covered in it. And then realized like, why am I so? I realized my skin is just like on fire. And my dad's like, yeah, you're basically covered in glass. And it was bizarre trying to get that out because you can't just like take a shower and scrub it. It's like
no.
literally in your skin, you know?
Yeah.
And to
Oh
work in
yeah.
that environment, how do you I mean, is there anything that you wear other than just like a denim shirt or
Yeah.
something heavy or whatever? Or
I mean, long sleeves and
long
long
sleeves.
pants and
Yeah.
and gloves.
Yeah. Brutal.
We
Um,
don't do that anymore now. We hire that out.
yeah,
But
smart. Smart. Um, okay. So you grew up around that. And then also interesting, the one thing you said, a cell phone business. Your family had a cell
yeah,
phone store?
yeah, and I think that
Like
was
what
in
era are we talking about? Cell phone store. It's like
mid '90s, mid
so the
'90s.
bricks, like the
Yeah, the
oh
bag
the
phones.
bag phone.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you'd have to buy them in advance and then try to convince people to buy them from you so that way you could pay the company back. Or well, you essentially would get paid back, but no, we had to buy all those phones in advance and for
The
as the
Motorola
inventory.
basically looked like an
Yeah.
army phone without the,
Yeah.
green color, right? Just giant. Had made that funky tone when you'd power it on, right?
Hmm.
Brr,
Oh
make that
yeah.
weird sound and
Coolest thing in the world, though. I remember driving in our little Ford Probe, in our little red Ford Probe, talking on our cell
so
phone in the
cool, right?
car.
Super cool. Love that.
Yeah.
Love it. In fact, if you watch the first Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen, yeah,
Yep.
Charlie Sheen, he's on his phone in the car, right? He's got like the Motorola that's the curly Q cord and all that stuff. He's on the phone, and at the time that was like, oh, it's just so super cool, right? 1987, I think, and that was like the height of technology to have a
Yep.
phone in your car. Yeah, bizarre. We've come a little
Yeah.
ways.
Like just slightly. I remember
Yeah.
seeing, you've got the phone that's like the brick that you flip the bottom part down and you yank the antenna up,
Yeah.
that's like 10 feet tall, it seems.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Okay, so I'm curious because I've had a lot of entrepreneurs or people that have grown up in entrepreneurial families on the show, and the guests tend to have gone one or two ways. They either go, "I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur because it was in my blood," or "I saw how hard my parents worked. They never made my games. They were working 7 days a week, and I knew I did not want to do that." So where did you see your parents, and what was your take on being an entrepreneur as a young person?
So I'm very fortunate. My parents were at everything, absolutely everything. Um, and I never really, I think, decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be an attorney, and then I thought that I wanted to be an accountant. So I actually got a degree. I have two degrees, one in business and one in accounting because I
Okay.
wanted to be an accountant. And then I was working for a data cabling company. And, I feel like there's so many of us when we grow up in an entrepreneurial family that just feel like you could do more. And I don't
Mm.
even know that you need to be in an entrepreneurial family, truthfully. There's that little thing inside of us that says, I can do more. I know that I could do better. I know that I could be more than what I am today. And so I was always, always out there kind of searching. It's not even like there were times when I was working two or three jobs. I had my full-time job. I was doing accounting taxes on the side
Mm.
during tax season when H&R Block was open. I'd work for H&R Block for
Oh
those
man.
4 months. And then on the weekends, I had a dog that I completely, absolutely fell in love with. And I took him to training. And then they asked me to help them train dogs in their training classes over the weekends. So I was literally working three jobs. Not because I needed the money. I've always loved to work. At one point, I thought that I wanted to open up a Camp Bow Wow. I actually looked at Camp Bow Wow's
Yes.
franchise, but they had already sold one here at the time. So I think I always knew I had that bug, but I just could never put my finger on what it was that I wanted to do. If you asked me in high school what I wanted to be when I grew up, I'm crazy enough. I used to say that I really didn't know. I always imagined myself on airplanes,
Hmm.
traveling, being a big wig of a company or owning my own company. But I could never figure out what that company was. Um,
Interesting.
which is funny when I look at where I'm at today, because I travel quite a bit to attend conferences or speak at conferences, or, we're
Hmm.
both in GoBundance together. So there's always conferences for GoBundance. So I'm on an airplane at least once a month. And it's crazy, if anybody believes in manifestation and vibration and
Yeah.
energy, to look back at my 17-year-old self that said, I don't know what I want to do, but I just can imagine myself on airplanes, either owning my own company or being, a CEO or a CFO of a company. And then here I am, and I'm completely at that place. And
Doing that thing.
wild. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, all right. So you finish high school, you go to college, you get your degree. What happens after college? You've talked about law and maybe being an accountant. Did you go
Yeah.
do that work at all, or what happened after school?
No, so I had sorry, I attended day classes. So I graduated high school, went to school during the day at a private college here locally called Drury College.
Yep.
It's now a university, but back then it was a college. My mother was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1999, which is the same year I went to college, and Drury was not cheap at all.
Mm,
So she asked me to move back home at that time, and I said yes, and because obviously they couldn't afford it back then.
right.
And so I moved back home, and then I actually transferred to a state college during the day, which our classrooms went from 30 people to like 150 people, and that was not an environment that I did well in.
Yep.
So I said, all right, I got to figure out a way to go back to Drury. And so I decided to pick up a job working full time during the day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, your corporate America, working for a data cabling company. And then I attended night school at Drury, which is where I finished it out. So I was still able to get both of my degrees in 4.5 years
Oh, wow.
while attending night school. So I finished out my career, or my college career at Drury, working during the day to help cover the cost of it, because the cost of night school at Drury was the same cost as the day school at that state school.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
that's what I chose to do. And I loved that data cabling job. I absolutely loved it for years. I was there for 13 years, and majority of that time I absolutely loved it. And yeah, I kind of figured that's where I was going to end up in life. I figured I was going to retire out when I
What
was old and grumpy. And
What did you do? What did you
um,
do for the data cabling company? What kind of what area of the business were you in?
I ran their entire office.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. I,
So,
I worked with all men for the majority of it, which I actually liked working with the guys because it was pretty laid back. And you guys are a lot more laid back.
so
So
true.
it was, I
So
loved it.
true.
I loved working with the guys. The guys were so easy. And then we got big enough where I had an assistant for a while. But yeah, most of those years, I was the office manager, the invoicing, accounts receivable, anything to do in the office while the boys went out and did, the work
Did the
on
work.
site.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I gotcha. And so, how did your mom do through this time with her cancer and all that?
She did great. So she's a two-time cancer survivor. She got it
Wow. God bless
in
her. That's
99.
awesome.
Yeah, and then again in 2009. And they're marathon runners, so she ran marathons during that second round.
Oh,
And
wow.
my parents are the most amazing, inspiring people I've ever met.
That's awesome. God bless her. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at the data company and you think you're going to finish up there and retire there as a young person. You're like, "Yep, I'm not leaving."
Sure.
But
I'm in my
something,
20s thinking I'm retired.
right? Exactly. Yep, something happens along the way. So what's kind of next on your journey as you're kind of progressing forward?
So I got a divorce, and
Sh-
that actually wasn't the catalyst for me leaving, but I think that was the catalyst of me saying, the reason that I got a divorce was, again, I just felt like this isn't where I belong. And so when I got the divorce, I thought, okay, well, maybe that would be the thing that would, getting the divorce would fulfill me in some way, shape, or form. And it still didn't. I still just could not figure out what's missing. Something was missing. And then it really started to take a toll on my health. And I started to get like chronic illnesses, and I
Hmm.
started to get rashes in different spots. And I could never figure out what it was. It turns out it was stress. And to be quite honest, nothing at my job was any more stressful than normal. I think the universe has a silly way of pushing you when you don't realize what it's doing. And so I decided to finally listen and, left that job. And I left that job and lived on the government for 6 or 8 months while I was trying to figure out what to
Oh,
do. I
wow.
completely had no job whatsoever. Scariest thing I've ever done for sure.
Wow. So you voluntarily left that job in the midst of being divorced and no child support. I know I mentioned that in the read-in. That was part of
Yeah.
some of the background data. You intentionally didn't get child support or didn't have child support as part of the divorce decree. And
Yep.
so you're like just food stamps, Medicare,
Yeah.
Medicaid, I guess, and
hmm
yep,
Unemployment.
unemployment. Yep. And so where are you living at this point? And you've got the boys, right? So you've got a 3 and 4 year old at this point.
Yeah. Living in a house that I own.
Okay. Okay. So you're living so you're staying in your same home.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Gotcha. And then what starts to happen? I mean, so you're 6 to 8 months. So that's a pretty long period of time to be in that situation or that state. I would think of stress. And I know, again, in the read-in, I mentioned that your boys really didn't know. So you worked hard to make sure that they had no awareness of anything was different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So their father and I have always done a great job of co-parenting very well together. So, if I ever needed help, which I never did, but if I ever did, I know he would have helped. And there was no way that I was going to let my boys know the financial situation that we were in. And I believed in myself so much. And my illnesses actually went away, which is crazy when you think
Mm.
about, you would think you'd be more stressed being unemployed and no income coming in, but I was actually relieved, strangely enough. Listen, guys, anybody listening to this, I'm not recommending you quit your job with no backup plan. I do
Right.
not recommend that. Do not follow the Kelly way. But there was something, I was oddly at peace when I left that job. And I gave a 6 week notice. So he had
Mm.
plenty of notice. I gave him a 6 week notice, and I was oddly at peace. And my chronic illnesses went away. All of the rashes that were, popping up from the stress completely dissipated. And I think it was almost as if my body went through a detox period.
Mm.
And I never felt scared of what was going to happen to me because I just knew that I would be shown whatever was going to whatever was going to happen. I knew that we would be okay, but I couldn't tell you how I knew. I just felt it. I truly felt it deep down in my soul that we were going to be fine.
Mm.
So when my mother said, "Why don't you come be my transaction coordinator for a little bit?" And she said, "Why don't you be my TC?" Because she was, this was in 2013. So at this point, the market had crashed, the
Yeah.
'08 crash had happened. She actually got licensed in 2006 because we were developing out a subdivision at that time. And so she thought, even somebody that had worked with a realtor for over 20 years, she still thought all real estate agents did was throw a sign in the yard. So she said, "I'm not going to have my agent sell all these houses. I'm just going to go get my license and I'll sell them." And then that was 2006. The market crashed in 2008. All of these real estate agents were going out of business, but
Mm.
we knew nothing else but real estate in my life. So she said, "Well, I can't go get another job," because she'd never had a job, I think, since she was 19 years old. She said, "I guess I got to really put some effort into this." Well, everybody else was leaving. So she became the number one agent at the brokerage. And so then she asked me to join her. She said, "Just come join me while you figure out what it is you want to do with the rest of your life." And I said, "That's fine. I'll do that." And I really was going to work 20 hours a week for her because I had the, office management experience with the data cabling company. And then there's such a fine line on what an assistant can talk to a client about. So she
Mm.
said, we're really treading on that line. Why don't you get your license?" And I was kicking and screaming. I was like, I do not want to be a real estate agent at all. I see the stress. I'm sitting watching the Kansas City Chiefs play football on a Sunday, and you're at an open house, and I'm laughing at you. And yeah, I said, "I just don't want it. I've seen you leave family dinners and take phone calls and cry. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be on call 24/7. She said, "Just get your license." So I got my license, and then she pretty much threw me out. I like to say she threw me to the wolves. I had to learn to sink or swim or I was going to get all eaten up. Um, but that was in 2013. And then, I mean, the two of us together were like a powerhouse. We hired our first real estate coach in 2016. and then started building a team in 2016. And then she became a real estate coach. I became a real estate coach, both of us in 2017. And she's not, she's now at the retirement age,
Yeah.
and she just kind of comes in when she wants to. But I finally found it, Eric. I finally found the thing that I was searching for. It took me 33 years, but I finally found it.
Which was real estate. So doing
Yeah.
that business. Yeah. So many questions pop up for me around that time period too. So 2008, and I recall it very well. Financial meltdown, markets are crashing. The buck was breaking. There was all talk of like, is the whole financial system going to fold in on itself?
Mm-hmm.
And your family's in real estate now. You were on the building side, so you're building properties. But do you recall what like how that impacted the family in terms of, what was the impact to the business? Obviously, if you're building homes, it's maybe different if you're in a real estate market, and like you mentioned, those realtors are all leaving because they can't make a living. But tell me about like what the family was going through during that very tumultuous time.
So I was married at the time, and my guy that was my husband, call him my husband, was gainfully employed. So for us, but in my personal family, we didn't have a lot of financial effects, but in my parents, they really did. Banks were not loaning money, even though we had never been late on a payment. They were not loaning any money.
Yep.
So we had to get very creative. The only time they would loan you money is if you had a contract. You couldn't get a contract unless somebody wanted to, buy a house, which nobody wanted to buy a house. So they would loan money on customs, but they would not loan money on specs. And here we're building out this whole subdivision that was based on spec homes.
Sure.
So there was a whole year where my father did not build a single house whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
And they had, over the years, back in the 80s, one of the very wealthy gentlemen that lives in our city told my parents, just buy one rental property a year and you will retire wealthy. You will retire in a safe place. So they listened to him and did that. And over the 80s and the 90s, they were kind of collecting or building their own rental properties. Yep. And they've made smart moves, and I've learned so much from them. They did not leverage those out as much as, a lot of investors that I see, they have those leveraged out to 80%, 90%. Yep. And they just didn't do that. They were smart. So the rental property is the only thing that kept them afloat. And it's been a saving grace because so many builders were going out of business. Title companies all of a sudden were owning all of this property that they didn't want to own. So then, knowing that my father was still able to build, they would go to him, and they were selling $40,000 lots. They were selling them to us for $15,000. Our development, those lots cost us about $30,000. So he was actually left our development to go to these cheaper pieces of land so he could get some houses sold, earn a little bit more money, and then go back to our development. So just creative financing. We had all of those stores that we'd owned over the years were through commercial property that we owned that we had fully paid off. So, he did have to put a lien on that commercial property to help cover the cost of the development. So it definitely took a huge financial hit, but nothing like, what other people went through.
Right.
And I like to say, there's so much uncertainty now with the market, and a lot of real estate agents are getting nervous. And I just look to my parents and I think, my mother's business grew during the recession. So I just got to keep getting up, putting one foot in front of the other, and, we'll grow.
Yeah. And that market, so they're doing the creative thing. They're scratching it out, figuring out a way to keep moving forward. And the market starts to recover in 2010 or 11, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 2011. Yeah.
Yeah. So what starts to happen to their business from there? And then you got into the business in 2013, right?
It's 2013. Yeah.
Yep. So they're in the recovery mode. They've got, stuff starts to, and the market really took off, I think, in those kind of 11, 12, 13, sort of had that snapback, but it took a minute to get there. It eventually did. So their business starts to go, and then you've got the divorce happens in 2011, and then 13, you join your mom's real estate practice kind of begrudgingly, and it just starts to take off for you. What do you recall kind of that, that's a tough transition, right? To go that 2011 was obviously a very hard time. And then really 2 years later, it's not super long, but there's some time there before you really started to see the corner turn. right? And you start to get in a good place professionally, financially, where you're like, I feel like I found my thing. Do you remember what kind of emotions you went through and during those 2 years, or kind of what that was like? You're working to keep the boys kind of like, in a good place. Can you share anything there? Anything come to mind?
Sure. Yeah. I drank a lot.
Mm,
I did. That was my coping mechanism. I would go out the nights that I didn't have my kids because their father and I split them 50-50. I would just go out and I'd stay out almost all night long. And on the weekends I didn't have them, I'd stay out all night long. And then on the nights that they would go to bed, 9 o'clock, I'd start drinking again. So I was in such a bad place. I mean,
oh, wow.
such a bad place. And I think that was probably most of it, really, just right after my divorce, and I was in my early 30s. And yeah, I just spent I was either working, I was either at work, or I was at a bar, is pretty much where I was.
Man.
So yeah,
And
I
then,
think, I hit a pretty low spot then, for sure. And I still drink now, but not near as much. I mean, I'm very much more conscious about it now than I used to be. It's not like it is my sole drink. At the end of the day, all I
right.
could think about was grabbing a beer, and I do not do that at all now.
Yeah.
And it's I tell my children a lot, they saved me, because I think had I not had to be a mom half
Mm,
50% of the time, I probably would have gotten into a much darker place.
yeah. Okay. Man, I appreciate you sharing that. So, all right. So then you start to come out of that dark place and your business starting to go. Now you're coaching other realtors and you're starting to speak. Talk a bit about that, about as your business starts to take off. Because you mentioned the aspect of real estate that comes to mind for me that I think a lot of people may not appreciate, which is realtors are 24/7. If you're selling homes, if I'm a buyer or a seller and I've got questions, I'm calling you and I almost expect an answer or a very quick response. So whether that's real or fair or anything else, realtors have to be very good at boundaries. Otherwise, it's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, or it can be, and which can, while it can lead to a lot of financial success, it also can lead to burnout and just poor health and that type of thing. So what was that like as your business starts taking off and you're getting some financial relief to balancing the demands of that job?
I would say, Eric, this is probably one of the things that I'm asked to speak on more than anything else. So it is it is an all-encompassing job, and you really have to learn to put your boundaries up. You've got to get rid of the scarcity mindset that if I don't
Mm,
take this call, I'm going to lose this client. If I don't answer them right now, they're going to be mad at me. And it is a big turning point that you have to have in your head. I went 9 weeks without a single day off. And I'm not talking like answering emails or text messages. I'm talking get up in the morning, get completely ready,
yeah.
go show houses, 9 weeks of that. And it was not what I wanted. I was so unhappy. I'd actually lost a relationship over it.
Mm,
I was in a healthy relationship at that time. I lost that over it because I was never home. And
yep.
I expected him to take care of my kids, and that's not right either.
Yep.
And then kids were not there. So I'm glad that I did that for that 9 weeks, because people will go years. 9 weeks
Yep.
in the grand scheme of things is very short, but I really had to learn to set some boundaries. Um, so from then moving forward, and my kids were still very young at that time. So from then moving forward, practices were appointments on my calendar. Games were appointments on my calendar. Family
Mm,
time was an appointment on my calendar. And I had to do that. And I had to tell myself, listen, my kid is playing basketball tonight. And if I were at a listing appointment for that hour, would I answer my phone? Would I have my phone there? And the
right.
answer is no. You're not going
Right.
to do that in front of your client. So
Right.
why do I not give my children the same respect that I would get a complete stranger? Because I would
Yep.
never say, Eric, hold on, I'm so sorry, somebody's texting me, if I'm doing a listing appointment at your
Right.
house.
Right.
Why am I doing that why am I allowing that to happen when it came to watching a basketball game? So I never told my clients, and I'm sorry I can't show you houses on Wednesday night because I have a basketball game. I would say, I'm so sorry, I have other appointments
Yep.
Wednesday night. Can we look Thursday night?
Yep. Yeah.
I did lose one client over it. I'd spent all weekend, Memorial weekend. This was the catalyst of me going, enough is enough. This was the end of the 9 weeks. I'd had a client that was in town for the weekend. They were moving here from Iowa to be closer to family, which is very ironic
Mm.
considering the situation. And on Monday, I said, hey, I've spent all weekend with you. So tomorrow, this was on Sunday, I said, tomorrow I'm going to be, the kids and I are going to the pool for the day. And they wanted to see two houses on Monday. And I said, no, I'm sorry. I told you I'm spending the day with my kids. And they fired me over it
Wow.
after spending all weekend with them.
Yep.
And I quipped back, which, shame on me at this time, but I quipped back and said, that's funny because I would have thought for somebody that's moving here to be closer to family, you would understand the importance of family.
Yeah.
But that's when I realized that I cannot tell people that I'm hanging out with my family. I have to say, I'm so sorry. I have other appointments and I'm not
Sure.
able to work with you today.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great lesson for really any industry, right? Any business is the putting your family appointments on your calendar and holding the same rules for those appointments as you do for any business appointment, right? And I think I know dads struggle with this. I've struggled with it over time where it's like, well, okay, I've got this blocked for a family event when my kids were little. They're grown now and out of the house, but when they were young, block some time. But then if something came up business-wise, an opportunity, a business meeting, I can remember, and it's almost embarrassing as I'm thinking about it, of saying, hey, I can't make that, or I'm going to be late because I got this business meeting coming up. And I would never do that if that was a new client meeting or some sort of a prospective client meeting. That meeting would stay, right? And I wouldn't encroach on it. But we do with family. And so coming to that realization is such a great lesson of you treat all those appointments the same. You treat your family as important, and because they're more important than your business, but you certainly treat them with the same level of importance at a minimum, and don't steal that time, right? That's such a great lesson.
Yeah. And I think for those of us that are in GoBundance, and I know your podcast audience is the same way, we're all driven and we're high caliber, driven people that always are looking for the next thing, looking for a leg up. And so it's easy for us to get lost in that excitement.
Yes.
And forget the things that really truly matter at the end of the day.
For sure. And I know you mentioned The Gap and the Gain, and I've talked about that book on this program before. It's a great book, Dan Sullivan, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, where some of your highest achievers are some of the most unhappy people on the planet because they're constantly looking to the next gain, or to the gap, to the thing that they're trying to attain. And they don't look back to see how much they've gained along the way, to appreciate the relationships, all the people, all the accomplishment that they've had to fuel them going forward, but to take time to recognize that gain. They're constantly just looking forward at the gap between them and the next set of goals. So being a high energy, hard working, those are great blessings and talents and gifts, but they can also eat us up, right? They can eat you alive, because if you don't control that, it can just constantly result in you looking to the next set of goalposts that are always in the distance and not taking time for family, or not taking time to appreciate where you've come from, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of us fall into that.
For sure. Okay, so now your business is booming. You're creating boundaries. You've got the coaching thing going on. You're speaking a bit. Talk about how your business evolves, and then you end up at this Tony Robbins event I know recently. But talk about how your businesses continue to grow and the areas that that are developing.
So I think when I started becoming a real estate coach, well, quite frankly, when I started building a team, I started it for pretty selfish reasons. You think teams are easy and I'm going to just make a lot of money and not have to do a lot of work, and which is just the opposite of what growing a team is like. And I have, over the years, really tried to figure out what my purpose is in life. And when I became a real estate coach, I finally felt like I'd found the purpose of helping people to a level that I had never even dreamt of. But it's helping other agents, aspiring agents that are struggling, agents that want to do this for a living. I know how blessed my life is, and I know how much wealth of knowledge that I am, having grown up into this, family of entrepreneurs, and I want to share that with everybody. So when I started becoming a real estate coach, I was like, this is it, man. I love this. I love helping people. I got excited for every coaching call that I would take. The hard part is when they are not coachable. I love coaching people when they're ready to be coached. Sometimes that isn't always the case, but that is really where, over the last, probably 10 years, because I've been an agent now for 12 years, over the last 10 years, where I've really figured out my place in life is to help other people. And it grows even more the older that I'm getting. I'm realizing that as long as my head is always in a giving mode and an abundance mode, then my business continues to grow. My coaching continues to grow. Everything around me continues to grow. And I flourish as well because I'm in the space that the universe, the Lord, has planted me to be. That's where I feel like I do the most help for others. And that a lot of times is speaking on stages too. I have had so many mothers that have come up to me as I do the main talk is typically about, creating boundaries. And the number of people that have come up to me and said, oh my gosh, I've never felt like it that way. Like we were just talking about earlier, having your children, realizing that they are an appointment and they've never thought about it that way. And it was like a light bulb switch. And now all of a sudden they're excited because they have this new tool in their tool belt that for me, I'm like, well, how did you not think about that? But they just don't. You get so tunnel vision. And so I'm so passionate about it. I love helping other people. I want all the people that I know that the Lord is going to put me in front of the people that need to hear what I have to say, that I'm here to help for sure.
Right on. Love that. Okay. So talk a bit about this recent, I'm curious on this Tony Robbins thing, because one of the interesting aspects of that story is you're sitting in the diamond seats or the platinum seats or, these $2,000 tickets, right? And it's you and your sons, right? So you've brought your boys to this event. They're teenagers. They're traveling with you. And so you're in a very exclusive area, and they somehow get wind that you're a person that's had at one point been on welfare. You're a single mom, never remarried, raising your boys, and you're in these special seats, these very expensive seats. And so they want to interview you. And so talk a bit about that, what that experience was like. And the fact, and the part of the story that I want to get to is your boys didn't know that you had been on welfare and food stamps. And so you were going to have to tell them, hey, part of this interview is I'm going to be talking about some things that you need to know so that you're not surprised when these questions come up. So talk about that whole event, if you would.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if I get emotional, but so I never did allow, I don't even think I was hiding it. They were just so young. It really wasn't anything they needed to know about when we were living on welfare. But I was actually visiting with Dan Martell, who is another coach in a different aspect, and he said people need to hear your story. And through GoBundance, I would tell our stories because we do a lot of the power of me's, and I would go through the story, and quite frankly, was completely embarrassed about my story, to be honest. And I didn't want a lot of people knowing, but I would dip my toe in. Within the GoBundance world, we're very tight knit, so I would dip my toe in it and say, okay, guys, I'm going to be completely vulnerable, and here's where I was. And they would say, people need to hear this. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I think I was in GoBundance 3 years before I finally was like, oh, okay, maybe people really do need to hear this. And the things that have happened to me over the last few years, just because I've started telling this story, is phenomenal. And when you join a UPW, and you go, they put you all in a group within Facebook. So, let's introduce yourself. And these are all the people that are going to be at the event. So I said, me and my kids are coming. They were 15 and 17 at the time. I'm bringing my children. And it's crazy to think that just 10 short years ago, I was living on welfare, food stamps, and Medicaid. And now I'm able to take them to New York City and sit in the diamond seats. And I'm super excited to see what Tony can share with me and my children, because I had never attended a Tony Robbins event. I think he was one of the as most of us, he was probably one of the very first personal development people we'd ever heard. Between him and Jim Rohn, absolutely changed my life. And so I was, again, just kind of dipping my toe in. And there were 16,000 people in this venue. So did I ever think that anybody was going to see this? Like 16,000 people, I'm just in a sea of nobody. And then all of a sudden they reached out to me, and I don't remember if it was on Messenger or phone call first, but I got an email. Sorry, it was an email. And a gentleman said, hey, we want to interview you. And I, quite frankly, thought it was fake. So I
would too. I would for sure.
And I got another little knock, on my email. And then I was like, all right, we'll just try this. So I responded. And then all of a sudden I'm on a phone call with them. And they're interviewing me. There were one or two other people that they were interviewing out of a sea of 16,000 people. And they wanted to interview the kids too. And so, I mean, talk about sweating, right? And almost a self-sabotage moment.
Yeah.
I think almost a self-sabotage moment because I thought it was fake. You know,
Mm.
when people to that caliber reach out to you, I'm like, oh, this is
Yeah.
totally fake. Well, is it? You know, again, the self-sabotage.
Right.
So, or the imposter syndrome. So,
Yeah.
um, I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I visited with visited with a gentleman on the phone for about 45 minutes and kind of said, this is what we're wanting to do. This is what we're wanting to promote. And this was the first time that they'd done anything like this, but they were so inspired by my story. And I was nervous. I was like, you know, I know I could hear it in my voice, which is not like me. I'm typically very even keel. I love singing with you. I love this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And so we talked about what he needed from me. He needed a video of us packing. He needed a video of us loading up on the airplane, all this B-roll, right? And I'm writing
Mm-hmm.
all this down and I'm nervous and I'm like, and this cannot be real. So before we left the event, I'm videoing my boys and they're rolling their eyes at me. Of course, they really didn't know who Tony Robbins was.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, whatever, mom's dragging us to another one of these things because I've dragged to a few things like that.
Yeah.
Never to this caliber.
Yeah.
Like we're talking rooms of like 400 people, not 16,000.
Yeah.
And but since I've been blessed to speak on stages, they get to come to a lot of those events. I've pulled them up on stage before. I don't. They
Yeah.
might hate me at this point. They
Yeah.
probably. But
That's right.
so it's another crazy thing mom has us dragging us to. So yeah, I set him down and I said, hey, I kind of need to tell you guys, you know, and I told him this story back in 2013, 2012, 2013. We were living on food stamps and they were like, what's food stamps? You know, so I really had
Right.
to explain because they were absolutely blown away
Yeah.
because everything that I do now, because I still don't get any financial help from their dad, is I'm the one that purchased both vehicles for them. So they each own a vehicle because I bought it. We live in this really nice house because I bought it. Like
Yeah.
you know, they get the really nice shoes because, you know, I swear their wardrobe is more expensive than mine, but I really had to talk to them about what it was. And there was silence, there was awkward
Mm.
movements, you know, and they had no idea. And they're boys,
Yeah.
so they're not super open.
Yeah.
And you know, how do you feel? I'm like, well, I mean, it's weird. I don't know. How am I supposed to feel? But what was crazy is when we got to the event, it was the night before the event. The gentleman had asked us to meet him at the venue. So we went to the venue and that's where they did their first taping because they taped us at the very beginning, at the very end, and then once in the middle.
Mm.
So he asked them, how did you feel about that? You know, I had both of my boys sitting on both sides of me. They were so nervous. I'm the
Yeah.
one that flourishes in a spotlight. They don't. So they were both so nervous. And they said, yeah, we had no idea. And it made them look at me in a different light.
Mm.
And I think it made them appreciate all the hard work that we've done over the years. That was also the very first time that I told them that they had actually saved me from a really dark place. When
Mm.
I was drinking a lot, went to a lot of parties, I was surrounded by a lot of things that I shouldn't have been surrounded by, that I chose not to partake in most of it, but the
Right.
drinking was definitely something I did. So
Yeah.
I said, you know, you guys really made a profound impact on me because my whole life has been making sure that you guys were safe. And I knew that if something happened to me, you wouldn't, you know,
Yeah.
chances of something happening. So
Yeah.
I think we grew so much as a family during those 4 days that we were at UPW. And the vulnerability that I had to show to my boys to remind them that I'm still a human being, we're still
Yeah.
a person.
Right.
And then the work that we did while we were at UPW, and they were very vulnerable and open with me for a lot of those questions. And then, you know, the middle of the process about how much they loved it, the end of the process about how much they learned, but it really opened their eyes to what you can accomplish even when you're at your lowest.
Yeah. Man, I love that. And it's what comes up for me in this topic is, and I've had this conversation many times on the show with guests, this idea that some of the hardest lessons that we learn become cornerstone moments, right? They really shape us and form us into who we are. And we wouldn't necessarily want to go back to those lessons, but we also wouldn't remove them, right? And so then having gone down a hard path, as parents, I see a tendency and the potential to say, I just want to make the path really smooth for my kids. Like, I don't want them to have to go through what I went through. So parents remove these obstacles and challenge and provide every resource in abundance and all these things for their kids, because they're like, this is what I would have wanted. I didn't want to have to go through what I went through, even though I learned a lot of things. And then that absence of struggle and challenge and almost then becomes a detriment, right? It can become like this thing that the kids need, that struggle, some amount of struggle and tension and finding their own way. Otherwise, I don't know if it's human nature, we sort of kind of go off the rails, right? It's easy to get lost without challenge. And I think especially when guests that have shared stories that are like, my gosh, that's unbelievable what you came through, is this tendency of like, yeah, I'm going to make sure my kids don't go through that. Not that you want your kids on food stamps, but what have you thought about this, the idea of, so there's, you're sharing the story of what they experienced, even though they didn't experience it, what was going on in the background, and then, how that's formed you. And then what do you do with that in terms of like how you set your boys up for success going forward, like as teenagers? Have you kind of thought through that at all, or have a perspective on that relative to child rearing and, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. That's a fantastic question. And I don't know that I've got all the answers for that. They have attended a lot of conferences with me, and I would hope that that is because they are learning something
Yeah.
from that. Tony Robbins does talk a lot about at his conference, hitting the lowest of the low points, and you are capable and you are worthy, and
Yeah.
you can do whatever you set your mind to. But I have probably sheltered them from a lot of that as well. I probably won't ever know that until they hit their 20s or 30s.
Yeah.
I would like to think that I haven't sheltered them all that much. But we hire a cleaning. They've never had to clean a toilet in their life,
Right.
So
Right.
it's like all these little things. But my health, I did have some health issues last year, and I got to where I couldn't cook dinner even anymore. So they stepped up and learned how to cook dinner. And they both do have jobs, and I don't buy anything extra for them. So if they want Chick-fil-A for dinner, they are buying their own Chick-fil-A and their own gas. And so it's that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I think that's TBD. I'm just going to have to see how bad I messed up when
I'm telling you, it is. I think it's, I've had this conversation just recently, this whole idea that if I look back at my own family, so my father, they had a very poverty stricken sort of upbringing, right? So they had a big family and some goods with that, and some harshness with that, but they also had food scarcity. Like they had bills, and they weren't always confident where food was going to be. And I never had that as a kid, right? My mom made sure that we were going to be, and I think we lived in a similar thing of, I never felt like I lacked anything. And yet we were probably below, slightly, middle class to slightly lower than middle class. My dad always worked his tail off and always provided. But if you look probably at the amount of money my parents made, it was enough to kind of pay the bills. But as kids, we didn't know it, any different. And then if I look at my own children, a generation after that, they had more than I had, right? So it's funny too, because if I think about like the very first time my dad flew on an airplane, I think he was in his 40s. First time I flew on an airplane, I was 12. The first time my kids flew on an airplane, they were 6 months. My daughter, I think, was 6 months, and my son was like 2 months. They flew to Chicago with my wife. My wife took them. I know my wife. My God bless my wife. She took my son, who was 2 months, to Chicago to watch me run the Chicago Marathon, and was getting on and off subways with a baby, literally nursing him on the curb, just to watch my ridiculous self run around this marathon. But yeah. Anyway, but the point being is, I think generationally, as we progress as humans, there's more abundance just almost by default. Now, certainly, that's not always the case. You have generational interruptions. You have super successful families that, other, generations go sideways and have challenges. But it's this idea that tension is good, that some amount of tension and some amount of work and struggle is good, with some guardrails, obviously, as parents. But it is I think one of, because we were the same. Like I wanted to provide every resource for my kids, knock down any barriers. We didn't helicopter parent them. We let them kind of deal with their stuff. But at the same time, there's no question we try to provide every single resource we could to help them be successful. And they're good kids. They're very successful kids. But at the same time, if I look back and analyze, I'm like, oh man, I probably should have done that different. And there's always going to be those moments, I think, as parents. But it's with the challenge that you've been through, I'm just always curious to get any takeaways on, how that's formed your parenting, right, and how you handle your boys and that.
Yeah, I mean, they still get in trouble at school, and I don't bail them out. So yeah. I do travel a lot, and they don't stay with their dad anymore. So they haven't for maybe 2 years. So I said, that's fine. But if you have parties at the house, you guys don't have an option anymore. So they are really self-sustaining for those week-long travels when I'm out of the house. And they have learned to, run the dishwasher, do their own laundry, and cook. So just knock on wood, they can manage in the real world.
Right on. Okay, talk a little bit, if you would, about the health journey you've been on and some of the health practices that you've discovered that have been really beneficial for you, if you would. I think it would be awesome to hear.
Yeah. So middle-aged woman, I'm 44, and started feeling tired a lot, and I could not figure it out. I went to a couple of GoBundance events, and I was super tired. I would find myself going back to lay down in the room at lunchtime, and when everybody was going out for the, after dinner soiree, I was not one of those people. I would just go back to the room, and I just could not figure it out. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And there are so many amazing doctors within the GoBundance world, and just smart people. So I started reaching out to people to try to figure out what was going on. And Dr. Betty Murray is in GoBundance Women. So I reached out to her, got set up on an appointment, realized my iron was like almost negative. I had no iron storage. It's called ferritin. I was extremely low in my testosterone, and my adrenals were pretty much shot. So I started my health journey. When I was at Tony Robbins, actually, I was at a really, really, really low point there too. Huge lack of energy. I did still walk on fire. I did make the boys. We did still do the fire walk, but I had super low energy. So when I got back from that's when I really started to take a deep dive into my health, which ironically enough, when you have adrenal fatigue, they don't want you to work out. So I kind of put all of that on the back burner and started tearing into supplements, all kinds of supplements. I hired Dr. Betty Murray, who hooked me up with one of her amazing doctors, and he gave me a bunch of supplements. So in January, I started taking those, went to our GoBundance event at the end of January, 1st of February, and I felt a huge difference, but I still knew that there was more that I could be doing. So I actually hired a nutritionist who had me do a 30-day elimination diet, which was tough, but the best thing ever. And so now I feel great. I'm still on the process of that health journey, but I have been able to get rid of a lot of the supplements that I was taking, and I have more energy now than I have had in such a long time. And I have learned more than anything else that processed foods are unbelievable. The things that you think that are healthy are not. And when we think that we're doing the right thing for our bodies, we're actually not. And there's, I don't know, just so many things that are on the shelves that, low fat and all this stuff. And it's not even food. It's not even food. So my gut was in such poor health. And so now I'm on the uptick from that and eating whole foods, very limited, a number of ingredients within each food. And I've gotten rid of a lot of things that didn't serve me. And it was a journey in itself, but it was kind of the next journey. As we need to be at the top of our game. If I want to continue with my purpose of helping other people, I need to have the energy to do that. If I want to continue my purpose of being a good mother, I need to have the energy to do that. So I had to remove the thought of it being selfish and realize that for me to be selfless, I had to be selfish in ways. And that's what it came to my health. So.
Yep. Is there a path that you recommend for people that's like, first you got to get a blood panel, or first you need to do X, Y, or Z? Are there steps that you would say do this first, or how to reach out?
The blood panel just makes it cool for those data geeks. So yeah, the blood panel's been great. I was at the point where I was getting blood work done every 6 months to try to figure out what else I needed to optimize. But my blood work mostly actually was coming back fairly good. So, and I still wasn't feeling all that great. So that wasn't like the catalyst. But I started with the AIP, the autoimmune protocol elimination diet. And so I got rid of so many foods that were in my diet, but most of it started up in my mind. Because had you asked me a year ago to get rid of, dairy, sugar really wasn't that hard for me. Gluten, coffee, caffeine, I would have been like, oh yeah, no, I'm not doing that. But I had to hit a pretty low point where I was sleeping 18 hours a day in order to say, okay, what is it going to take? And I hired a coach to help me do it. And since I've been a coach, I know the importance of being coachable. And I said, okay, Dr. Mary, whatever it is you tell me I need to do, I will do it. So I followed it almost to a T.
Right on. Awesome. Kellie, what are you excited about? What's on the radar for you as you look forward?
Oh, great question, Eric. Thank you. The housing market is definitely shifting right now, and luckily in little old Springfield, Missouri, we don't feel the ups and downs like a lot of the other. So many GoBundance people are in Austin, so we don't really feel the hit like a lot of other people do, but we do still feel the hit. I think this is the time really that I am growing the team more than ever because I really want to inspire people. And I want to be able to help people because there's going to be a lot of points where people start to feel helpless in the real estate world. And so many of us are just used to working with buyers and sellers, and there's so many other ways to have different streams of income. So on my team, there's ways to make 7 different streams of income. I want to help people get there. I want to help people and teach them how to do that. So that way, when we do have these ups and downs, which if you're making real estate your full-time career, man, there's always going to be ups and downs. It's not if, it's when. Because it will always happen. And in order to safeguard everybody, I want to teach other people to do that because I've been taught how to do that through my parents. I want to continue to spread that on and change the legacy. I mean, I absolutely doing all of this has changed my family tree and changed my boys' legacy. And I want to continue that on, not just for my generations, but to help other people change their generations as well.
Awesome. I love that. Is there because I know there's, real estate interest rates, all the things so they're up. Are you seeing single family home sales? Are they significantly down? Are they sort of flat? What are you seeing in the market right now up in your market?
Yeah, in the Midwest, it doesn't have the swings. So we are seeing days on market a little bit longer. Our sweet spot right now, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garages, right around the $300,000 range. So that's been kind of our sweet spot. You'll get a house sold pretty quickly. I say pretty quickly. I mean, what used to be a couple of weeks, now you're looking at a couple months. So it is slowing down for sure. But I can't say it's slowing down from anything. The last 5 years has been an absolute anomaly. So we are now at a more balanced market when I first started in real estate.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. I know for the last 5 years in Texas, you would list a house and get 4 and 5 and 6 offers on a weekend. And that became sort of the norm. You expected what do you mean I don't have multiple offers on the first weekend it's on the market, and the fact that it's taking 30 to 60 days, that is the world. The first house I bought in 1993, that's what you expected. You expected it, things were going to take time in real estate. So I appreciate that perspective. Kellie, it's been such a fun conversation. Where can people connect with you? And if they want to talk with you, connect relative to nutrition, raising kids, real estate, where would they find you?
All the things. So I'm all of my social media handlers are at Kellie Revoir. And that's Kellie. And then my last name is REV as in Victor, OIR. And all of them are there. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all those places. So just reach out to me. I love it.
Awesome. Kellie, thank you so much for taking time to share your story and being so vulnerable with the audience. I so appreciate it. I know it's going to touch some hearts and do some great things. So thank you again so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity tremendously.
Absolutely. To our audience, thank you for taking time to listen to the show. Always appreciate you do that. If you would write us a nice review, give us a rating, share the program with a friend, it helps us reach a broader audience. Until next time, friends, I'm Eric Sardina. You've been listening to the Return to Authenticity podcast, and bye for now.